Hello and welcome to a new video. This is the second episode of the Get Better at Edison series, and today we're going to cover another subject which is very common. A lot of misconceptions about this, which is missing the timing, and this is just such a kind of a big part of the game, just because the way the rules have been kind of organized by Konami. It's always been a bit confusing, like what effects happen, what effects miss the timing, what does missing the timing even mean, and it's good to kind of cover this, just especially for new players. This is something that is relatively easy to get to, but there are some interesting situations where it's not clear how this works. And on top of that, if you understand how this works, you can use it to your advantage. And I will kind of go through this, and they have some great examples on how this works. Basically, what does missing the timing means? It means that an effect doesn't activate because it can't be like an optional effect doesn't activate because it doesn't have basically the activation condition cannot be met, or cannot activate because it's doesn't have a time in the chain to be activated. Now, the first thing is, what are optional effects? And here they have a great example. So you have Sangan. Sangan, this is a mandatory effect. It says if this card, and any effect that does if cannot miss the timing. It has to be it's basically a mandatory. Any effect that does if and that doesn't have you can is a mandatory effect. And if effects with if can't miss timing. The only effects that can miss the timing are when. Effects that start with when discard, and that say you can because it's optional. And so Dupe Frog is the ultimate kind of example of monsters that miss the timing all the time, and Sangan basically can never miss the timing. This is, of course, as long as they're both sent to the graveyard. So this is kind of like the understanding the difference between these types of effects and how, for example, kind of a card like Dupe Frog can miss the timing. So the reason when you have the wrong timing is that when basically you're not the last thing to happen. For example, there's another effect in the chain. So just an example I can give, very simple for Dupe Frog. For example, costs. Dupe Frog is tributed to activate the effect of Substitute, and so you have the last thing to happen is that the Substitute is summoning a monster and not Dupe being sent to the graveyard. So Dupe Frog cannot be activated because it misses the timing due to Substitute effect being already in the chain. And the same thing with Tribute, Fusion, and Synchro summons. Dupe Frog is sent to a graveyard to tribute summon, synchro summon, or fusion summon, and the last thing to happen is that the monster is being summoned and not Dupe Frog being sent to a graveyard. So these are some of the things that can cause to miss the timing. Another example is that there's kind of then effects. So this is something that kind of can give you an idea of how you can make cards like a bottomless miss the timing, or even a torrential miss the timing. So Drill Warrior, for example, is a synchro that you can activate the effect to banish it, and then when it comes back, it has this effect. During the standby phase, it gets special summoned, and it says special summon this card, then add a monster from graveyard to your hand. So what happens is that the last thing to happen is actually the adding of the monster from the graveyard to the hand, and not actually the card being special summoned. And so then you can't actually chain a bottomless or a torrential to Drill Warrior because bottomless needs to be chained to a summon, and the last thing here is not the summon. So there's something kind of interesting, and there are a few effects like this where basically you can't like touch them, you can't like respond to their summon because that's not the last thing that happens. Another example is, this is a great example and something you can use in your games to kind of make things miss timing. Let's say a player uses reinforcement in the army, and then you can, the other player chains Call of the Haunted to it, or even to your own card. Another example is activating Heavy Storm and chaining Return from a different dimension. When you do that, basically the Chain Link 2 is, of course, chains resolve backwards, so Chain Link 2 resolves first, so Call of the Haunted summons the monsters in this case, and then Chain Link 1 searches for a card. Since the last thing to happen is the search from reinforcement of the army, you can, and not the monster being summoned, that's already on the field, Trapper cannot be activated. Basically, you cannot break a chain. Trapper would be able to be activated if you had Chain Link 1 card resolving, the monster gets summoned, and then you can, in a new chain, Trapper would be activated. But you can't do that if you're breaking, basically, you can't do that because in this situation, because you have chain link 1 reinforcement, so you'd never have kind of an open, there's always something on a chain while the monster is summoned, and so bottomless cannot be activated. And this, you can do this, for example, you can heavy storm, and then chain, return from a different dimension. Return would resolve as chain link 2, no bottomless, no torrential can be activated, and then heavy storm resolves as chain link 1 and destroys everything. So this is something really powerful you can do to make cards miss the timing. And I mean, this is an example that you can use in a lot of games. Another thing you can do, for example, is you have, so let's say you wouldn't do this often in the game, but let's say somebody summons a dupe frog. What you can do is you can activate let's say something like Call of the Hunted, and chain to it. Well, basically, somebody summons a dupe frog. You can activate some effect, and then chain to that torrential, and basically that's how you can kind of make something like miss the timing. So because dupe frog wouldn't be able to resolve because you have torrential destroying, but in between there's another effect. So just I know I didn't use a great example, but just to understand that, like, there's ways you can make optional effects like this miss timing by basically activating something and chaining something to destroy them, and so the chain link 2 would destroy them, but there's still an effect chain link 1 that will make it miss timing. And yeah, I mean, you have, this happens often with like trap cards which have to be activated when something happens. So like bottomless, great example. Torrential has to be activated when something is summoned. All these things you can, if you know how the timing works, you can cause them to miss the timing. And then the other thing to kind of understand, since we have missing timing, kind of how kind of things go in a chain. I think this is something that is very important to learn. Like SEGOC, simultaneous effects go on chain. This is a good way to understand how effects go on chain, so you can also understand how how and why kind of things can miss the timing as well. So you have, very simply, the kind of the basics is this. Let's say something is activated. You have Dark Core, and you have the turn player Sangan, which is a mandatory effect, goes on chain link 1. The other player's mandatory effects goes chain link 2, and then the turn player's optional effects chain link 3, and other players' optional effects chain link 4. So mandatory effects go on the chain first. If simultaneous effects go on chain, the mandatory go first, and then the optional go second, and the turn player goes before the other player. Of course, if the other player's mandatory effect, I will go before the turn player's optional effect. So this is just an understanding kind of the 4 types of effects and how they are ordered in a chain. And then there's this kind of exception, early trigger. So an early trigger, it means basically you have a trigger order which kind of goes above this order of 4 that you see here. So for example, this is a very common example. You have everybody's playing Caius in Edison, and let's say you tribute a Sangan for a Caius. These are both mandatory trigger effects. So in theory, you could trigger them in any order. However, since Sangan was sent to the graveyard first, was tributed first, it must trigger before the Caius. So basically the chain will be chain link 1 Sangan, chain link 2 Caius. So that's and that's how you will restore the effect. First you will banish with the Caius, and then with the Sangan you will search. So that's just a way for you to understand how basically how missing the timing works, how effects basically get ordered on a chain. I hope you enjoyed this video. I think you can get a lot of value for this. And in Edison, what I'm trying to say is that yes, you can improve your game, you can become a better player by in deck building, become better at side decking and all that, understand all these things. But if you don't understand the rules very well, you're always going to have a limit into how good of a player you can be, because you can very great players use the rules to their advantage, and especially in kind of these situations where if you're not clear about how something works, it can actually hurt you, and you can basically get outplayed, because somebody, let's say you're preparing for someone with a bottomless, somebody can outplay you by chaining Call of the Hunted to your card. So for example, you activate Upside Goblin and they chain Call of the Hunted, they're gonna play around your bottomless in that way. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.